All right, everyone,
Yeah.
time for some combat radio. And with us is everyone's favorite former senior VP from Warner Brothers Studios turned producer, a rich history of just general production awesomeness, Mr. Bill Daly. Bill, how are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you. It's good to be
Yes.
here.
Yeah, supporting your
Hello to
sister
all
with a
my
cool
fans out there.
yes, your legions of fans that are
Yeah.
shaping up to
Keep the cards and letters coming.
yeah, right. We need to do a Bill Daly Bible of all the quotes and phrases that people can buy. I see you're also sporting a very nifty shirt that your sister's on, the Fender,
My oh yeah, my
the classic,
my sister my sister
guitar.
was the model for this
Yeah,
shirt.
yeah. So everyone pipe
She
down with
was
your complaints.
she actually was a Beck girl for a while.
Oh
You
yeah.
know the Beck's beer.
All right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Had I known that at the time, I would probably have drank in more packs.
Yeah, well, okay. Well.
I see you've got your movie behind you too, right? What's this on your
Oh,
desk?
Lyra, the documentary about Lyra McKee. It's still playing at excuse me one sec.
He's already out.
It's still out there in festivals. It's still winning awards. It's won
Mm-hmm.
a number of awards around the world. Lyra
Congratulations.
McKee was a journalist, a freelance journalist, actually in Northern Ireland, who was killed by the IRA. Um, she was a friend of mine. Um,
Was she targeted or was she killed
no,
in the
no,
crossfire?
it was really the most unfortunate thing for everybody because
Mm,
she had just recently moved from Belfast to Derry. There was something happening. There was like a riot had broken out, sort of thing. The police raided a house, and then suddenly the neighborhood started to erupt and everything. And
mm.
she switched into journalist mode and ran out to see what was happening. She stood behind the police, where theoretically it's supposed to be safe, but somebody started shooting a gun. The She was standing next to an armored vehicle, and the bullet ricocheted off the armored vehicle and hit her in the head, killed her.
Oh,
I miss her. She was fun. She was a lot of fun. She really was.
I'll try to make up the difference in your life,
Hold
in
on, let
terms
me.
of fun and excitement. But sorry to hear about that. Have you seen that movie? What's that movie that James Mason did? Odd Man Out.
Oh yeah, that is when I point to people to look at a black and white movie.
Incredible, isn't it?
That's the most amazing black and white cinematography I've seen. I think
Yeah.
Carol Reed was the director of that, I believe.
And just the way it progresses through the storm to into the snowstorm, just in really something else, just a really
Yeah.
and it's actually running for those people now interested on HBO Max, the Turner Classic Movies division of HBO
Oh,
Max, or what is Max now? No
I
sign
didn't
of
know that.
HBO, or yeah, it's free
I didn't know that. It's great. Yeah, I know. Max
if you have the
has
app.
if you subscribe to Max, yeah, if you're on the app, I have it on my Apple TV. Um, they have like a TCM section where, you know,
Yeah, and I
great.
love Newton's performance in it. You know, he was to me as a kid, he was Long John Silver, but in this, it's just the whole thing in the artist's loft and him just and them trying to smuggle him out wounded. Mason, just a enthralling movie and definitely one of the best looking films you can possibly see.
Robert Newton was an incredible character actor, and he really found a home at Disney, when he got, because
Yeah.
it wasn't just Long John Silver. He had done other things for Disney, but he really found a home.
Yeah, and so did Richard Todd, some of these guys who was a World War II veteran who went in on
Mhm.
D-Day. He also played Rob Roy, Robin Hood for Disney. They kind of
Right,
found this unique place to star in these action films where I don't think they were getting the break they wanted elsewhere.
right,
You know, Disney had this thing after the war where they couldn't take money out of the country. They had to do productions in the UK.
right.
And so that's why you got Treasure Island, Kidnapped, some of these movies.
Well, and
Anyway,
some of the series they did, The Scarecrow of Romney Marsh was
which is brilliant. Can you believe no
yeah.
one's remade that?
Well, there's been several movies of it. So not with that title, but like the Vicar of Dymchurch. There's a silent version
Mm,
of that. There's another one that it's on my Vudu. library. I bought it, an older movie, basically the same story. And then Disney made remember Disney was doing those little box sets of their TV shows and stuff, and
Yeah.
they came in this like tin container, looked like
Hmm.
you'd had to open it up and pull the thing out. So Disney
Yeah.
did a one where they basically did the episodes, and then what they did was they put together a couple of episodes, did some editing, and put it out as a feature film. The feature film really suffers by comparison. If you watch the 2 episodes or 3 episodes, whatever it was that made it up, is way, way better. The longer version that were individual episodes are way, way better. But you do get sort of a flavor of it from the feature film that they put out.
And it was really well cast actually at the time too. I felt like they
Oh
nailed
yeah,
those
Patrick
parts.
McGowan was
Yeah.
great, and they had a lot of British character actors there.
What was his prisoner number? 9? Was that what was his
Yeah, I don't
designation
remember. I don't
in the
remember.
prisoner?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I watched well, he before he did that, The Prisoner, he did Secret Agent Man, which
Yeah.
was here in the U.S. and in Britain the same title. The title was Danger Man, and so we got to know him as that, not recognizing him as the vicar in from Dymchurch. And it's
Hmm.
funny, this has been on my mind because I have a cousin who lives in Dymchurch on the south coast of England. Believe it or not, where all that
There
takes
you go.
place.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. It's
but
awesome.
but Patrick McGowan, and he's done quite a number of features, culminating then with Braveheart, where
Yeah. Right. He was
he
the villain
plays
in Braveheart.
Edward,
Yeah.
King Edward, the one of the Plantagenets.
So I think he reprised that role on The Simpsons too from The Prisoner. I think he came back and did it for like the episode where Homer ends up on the island and he's number 9. And it's anyways. And Iron Maiden, actually, the band tells a great story about him because they have a song called The Prisoner based on the show, and they had to go to him to get the rights. And they called him. They tell a great story where they call him, and I guess he actually answers his
Yeah,
he.
yeah,
I guess
he
he
did.
actually answered his own phone,
Yeah.
and they asked him, they had to like lobby him for the rights, and he's like, I think that's a fantastic idea, or whatever, just one of those like real
It's
chivalrous
wonderful
responses.
when you find somebody who has a real sense of humor about themselves
Yeah.
and about the role they did, and they get the fun. And we don't know what the pitch was from the Simpson people, but if the pitch is as clever as the shows they do, then
Right.
I don't see how anybody could resist,
No, it's
you know?
impossible. How can you say no? I'm sure someone has, but how? It just doesn't. The algebra doesn't add up on it. It's
Yeah,
funny because like that's how we see Roger Moore as a guy that was really well aware he was Roger Moore, the luckiest man in the world,
yeah, yeah.
when he entered a room, and I see Patrick being the same way. It's like, and probably at the time, because I remember seeing the Simpsons episode going, what is going on here? Because I didn't know the former show. This is back in the 90s that we didn't have access to everything. Libraries weren't on demand yet, but you could sense it was about something they were homaging that they had seen, and that the producers liked. And so you're like, what is this? And a friend of mine goes, this is The Prisoner. It's a British thing. And then we're like, all like, oh, it's a British
Yeah.
thing. That makes sense. That's why we're all
And
clueless.
it probably aired in Britain for a year or two before we got it.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? And it got a little, I liked it at first. I probably watched the first 2 seasons, maybe not, maybe only the first season. And
Yeah.
it was just a little odd for me. And I don't remember what was playing opposite it or what I was doing in my life, but I stopped watching it. It didn't really work for me as it progressed.
And it's hard to buy in. It's hard to buy into the notion that there's an island full of geniuses who've created or are aware of something. I mean, I guess at the time it was a little bit easier to get invested, but for me, it's like I remember watching going like by episode 2, I'm like, this is just a real. It's like an experiment in like cutting edge art, like production design. Like they were doing this far out kind of look to some of the rooms, and
Mhm.
he lived in like a very modest. He was assigned like a very modest prisoner's bungalow. It was like a
And
little
I think it was
condo,
I think it was shot on location in Wales, on the western coast of Wales, I
maybe.
believe. I've seen maps where they've sort of indicated that, and then I'm trying to think, okay, I remember. Remember
Hmm.
vaguely, it was a very modern sort of looking thing, the
Yeah.
show, or at least in our eyes, it was modern.
But
I'm a
Romney Marsh,
child of
I
the
loved.
50s.
What's that?
Okay. I'm a child of the 1950s.
Right, right.
Okay. The swinging 60s Frank Sinatra stuff was modern to me.
Hmm.
Okay. So, because the 50s was kind of drab in a lot of ways. The post-war stuff was a little drab when you look back.
It was. Speaking of Sinatra, how did Sinatra feel about that role in The Godfather that's rumored to be inspired by him? Do you know?
I'm sure he didn't like it. It's and in the book, Mario Puzo's book, there's also sort of like a Dean Martin character, a friend who's reputed to be a drinker, another singer, this sort of stuff. If I
Hmm.
recall correctly, I mean that book, I think I was still in high school when that book. I remember the paperback. We had the paperback book. And you know what's so funny? They when they did that movie, there was so much controversy around casting Marlon Brando in the movie. I was just starting
Yeah.
college when that movie was going into production. And then I remember there was all this controversy. So many people wanted to play that part. I remember Ernest Borgnine in particular was
Hmm.
lobbying very, very heavily to get the part of Vito Corleone. Um, and then and then the movie comes out, and of course it does gangbusters. I remember having to stand in a line in downtown Philadelphia to see it. It's the only place you could see them. Um, and there's technically a reason for that. And I'll tell you if you want to know. But I
Yeah,
remember
tell
having to
us.
stand in a line to see the movie, and for like an hour and a half or 2 hours, waiting for the earlier show to finish so we could go in to see it.
Hello, my name is Simon Williamson. Help us find a cure for NMOSD, neuromyelitis optica spectrum disorder, and with it, cancer. Please go to the Guthrie Jackson Foundation and donate if you can.
Um, One of the reasons they rolled those things out slowly, because if you lived in a city, the movies would play in like the downtown sort of areas. This went away in the 70s, but it would sort of play in the downtown area in the big movie palaces. And then it would slowly kind of roll out. It could be 6 months to a year before it got to the suburbs. And we could see the ads in the newspaper. And I remember, okay, do we want to wait for this to come a little closer to us or what, And the city line to Philadelphia was only 8 miles away for us. So going
Right.
downtown wasn't a hardship. Um, the big reason for that was because they were still using IB prints, dye transfer prints, and they can't crank them out that quickly. You just can't make the prints that quickly that you could roll movies out the way they do today. Well, today it's all digital, but let's say 15 years ago, you can't like we were doing worldwide, we were doing thousands, many thousands of Harry
Hmm.
Potter prints and The Matrix and all, at the same time. They were all going out the same day. It was opening in millions of theaters, well, thousands of theaters at the same time. Um, because the dye transfer prints are just ridiculously slow to make. And Technicolor was hanging on to that technology. I remember we did a test to see if we could do a dye transfer print of The Matrix when that came out, and we couldn't because if they had AB rolled the negative, which is a standard procedure in 16 millimeter, you AB roll like every odd numbered shot is on one roll, and then there's leader in between, and then the even numbered shots are on the B roll with leader in between, and then they run them through the printer, and two runs through, the negative two runs through the printer, making your IPs and your INs. They're perfect, and you can't see the splices because 16 millimeter was so small. You could see the splices in between the frames.
Hmm.
But 35 millimeter, you don't have that problem. So, but there's so many like quick picture changes with the Matrix. that the dye transfer process wasn't going to work unless they didn't think of this ahead of time. They didn't think to AB this that we were going to do dye transfer. So that didn't really work. But we did do dye transfer prints on Batman and Robin, believe it or not. We've spoken about that movie many times. And we premiered at the Village in Westwood. We premiered the with a dye transfer print. And so you know the routine when we do a premiere, we go out to the theater early. We'll go out first thing in the morning and we do a complete run through. We set up the theaters. The Dolby guys go in there. They measure the acoustics in the place. They correct any any imperfections in the sound, the phasing of the speakers and everything. We do all that. We measure the light on the screen. We'll change out the lamp if we need to make sure there's enough light, and then we do a complete run through. So, and then they have a platter there, so you have to physically go in, cut the leaders off, and attach reel 2 to reel 1. And you pull the trailer off of reel 1. Although on a you wouldn't have that on an answer print. So we had plattered this whole print and we're doing the run through. And somewhere, I think it was reel 2, maybe reel 3, we could see this happen. And the adrenaline was so much that it happened in slow motion. So they were using the bottom platter and that went through, and then it was coming out on the top platter and respooling itself. And the way so that's the way the platter would work. It'd come in, and then you would just go in the other direction for the next show. Okay, so the platter, a moth landed right on the platter, and the take-up reel went right over the moth, and that moth became a part of that movie. It got
Yep.
crushed in between that movie. Okay. Well, this is a dye transfer print, and I'm on the phone to Technicolor. I need a new reel 2. I think it was reel 2. I need a reel 2 replacement, and I need it now. And it took hours.
Now,
It
yeah.
took hours to get there because they had to make it. They had to make it. And then they had to bring it out to us. And we had one of our drivers, it was either Paul or Greg, was there waiting for it so they could zoom off to Westwood with it. And they were able to do that. And it worked fine and all that. But that was a dye transfer print. It was really beautiful, a really, really nice print. I wish the movie itself was worthy of the quality of the print that we had. But that was the last real successful dye transfer thing. And I don't know how many prints were made. They would have only gone to like New York, San Francisco, maybe Chicago. Um, that's it. Yeah, and LA. I mean, the movie probably played at the Village as well. So a new dye transfer print would have gone out there. We would have kept the original because that was our original answer print on dye transfer. But that was the reason
So
why The Godfather took so long to come out. All those movies took so long to come out. And what changed for them was Harry Saltzman. Harry Saltzman was one of the producers of James Bond. Harry Saltzman and Albert
right.
Broccoli. Okay. Harry Saltzman bought Technicolor. He wanted to get his money back. He wanted to saturate the marketplace with thousands of prints, make all the money the first weekend, as much as they could, and get his money back for this movie because it was too long. It was too long a process for the producers to actually get their money back, from making these movies. And so he bought Technicolor with that in mind, and he changed the way Technicolor operated, and they were able to start making the thousands of prints, in a week or 4 weeks or whatever amount of time they would have to make them and then ship them off to ports all over the world. And they had 5 labs when I was at Warner Brothers. They had LA, New York, London, Montreal, and Rome. They had 5
Hmm.
labs, but then they also um, either contracted with or bought a lab in Thailand, and so there are other places around the world where they could do it. It's all a memory now because everything is digital, and Technicolor is practically out of business. I mean, I'm sure they're doing digital work. There's something they're doing now, but it's not what it used to be.
Mm. Times change on us.
So your question was Frank Sinatra. Did Frank Sinatra like that at all? I doubt it. But it's not, all those stories about Frank Sinatra, with Vito Genovese, threatening Tommy Dorsey, was it? Threatening Tommy Dorsey to get Frank out of the contract. That's not what happened at all. And there actually is a documentary that HBO did, a Frank Sinatra thing, where Frank talks about that. And he's like, he's not really excited or anything about it. He's just saying, there's I get the sense that he's kind of amused by it, after all these years that had gone by. But what it was is that he got his agent to try to get him out, and they wouldn't budge and all that. Then he went to AFRA, which was the predecessor of AFTRA, which is now SAG-AFTRA. He went to his union. He went to AFRA and complained about the conditions in which Tommy Dorsey was working. It turns out Tommy Dorsey owed all kinds of payments for licensing of music that wasn't original. He was using other people's music and he wasn't paying for the licensing of it. So they made a deal that Frank could get out of the contract and they weren't going to pursue these claims. And it meant a huge chunk of money for Tommy Dorsey to have to pay these claims.
Mm.
So Frank got out of the contract that way.
So it wasn't done at the point of a revolver.
No, no, I know it's a great story though, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
a great story.
Well, they definitely know how to
You know,
spin that one, right? Leave it to Coppola to work
well,
up
but
some magic off
unless
it.
they it's just a better story than the real story,
Yeah, I
and there's
know.
more drama and even so, and people listening to this are going to say, "Ah, he doesn't know what the hell he's talking about." But I heard it from Frank Sinatra's own mouth in a documentary. I mean, I didn't hear it I wasn't in the room with him when he did it. I got to tell
Right.
you, all the interactions I ever had with Frank Sinatra, he was like the nicest, kindest, most generous person. It wasn't at all what you'd think Frank Sinatra was. I mean, he was just a really, really nice man.
Well, what do you suppose I think when you say it wasn't what you think? Like, what was like
Uh,
Sinatra
well,
like?
because
Break
they
Sinatra
they
down in
had
the
all
room.
those. Well, they're all the every time he got into a beef in Las Vegas and stuff, where he'd be fighting with pit bosses and stuff like that. I mean, I
Go
used
ahead.
to hear stuff. No,
Yeah,
no, but
we
I
all
used to
heard
hear
stuff.
stuff, and we all wondered, because the people who ran all the nightclubs that all those people worked in, all the vaudeville or all the people who worked in nightclubs, who owned the nightclubs, you
Right.
know, they weren't the pillars of society, you
Well,
know.
no, they weren't, were they? I do know that his Frank Sinatra's offices at Warner Brothers were really sought after real estate
Yes, they were. They
after
were.
he moved. They want
They
Spielberg,
were.
I think, jumped him. Spielberg, then Donner. Donner and Joel Silver had a feud over it, I think.
Well, no, well, Donner had them.
Hmm.
Richard was there before Joel. Joel had a deal when Joel was partnered with the Gordons, one of the Gordons, I'm getting this thing on my, is that you?
No,
Okay.
someone likes what you're saying.
No, yeah, it is. Yeah. Okay. Um, did you see that?
Yeah, I did see that.
Okay. I don't know what happened. I didn't do that.
It's the
Um,
Matrix, buddy.
yeah. So, um, he was with Larry Gordon. I think he was hooked up with Larry Gordon. So when you look at Die Hard, it's a silver Gordon Silver or something like that. It's
Right.
you know, and Joel was tied to the deal, the partnership or deal they had with Gordon, and then he came to Warner Brothers on his own, and Larry Gordon stayed wherever at Fox, I guess, or wherever he was. So, but Richard Donner was already in place. He had done Superman in the 70s, you know. So Richard had that spot. Joel was in Building 90. I don't remember there was a time when I did know who was in there before Joel was. Um,
I
but
thought it was
obviously it wasn't
in
as. that person was as memorable as Joel, I guess, you
No.
know. So,
Well, certainly he
um,
didn't have Joel's decorative
but
style
when
because
Richard
that guy had the
Donner
best
moved
lobby.
out, Richard Donner, before he left Warner Brothers, he simultaneously had a deal with Paramount and with Fox, believe it or not. And so did Mel Gibson. Mel Gibson had deals at three different studios simultaneously. Um, but Dick Donner, I know he did a movie at Paramount after he left Warner Brothers. He might have done some other. He did a franchise movie, I think, or a Morgan Creek one. It was 16 Blocks. That was the negative
Mm,
pickup to us that Richard Donner had done.
right.
So we're gonna hear some noise because my wife's coming in the door. I can hear her. So so Frank's office, yeah, because in building that was like 101, I think, or
Well,
110, 101. That
yeah, Frank's office was it was a nice spot, and
yeah.
that's where I met Donner when he was there. But I think Marshall was working with him at the time,
Yeah, Mark
actually.
was, yeah. Mark Marshall was there. I remember meeting
Yeah.
Mark the first time down there in the vicinity of Richard's office. I remember going to Warner Brothers in the 70s and First Artists was in that whole building. They occupied that whole building. You know, the
Mhm.
company that Streisand and Paul Newman and Steve McQueen and Sidney
Yeah.
Poitier, they all jointly owned First Artists. They were in there. I remember they had a big sign up. I was like, wow. I mean, if you know, if this is in 78, I want to say it wasn't the first time I'd been to Warner Brothers, but I was going to a screening in screening room 5, I think, and you kind of had to walk if you went around the water tower, but I
Yeah.
in those days I didn't fully know my way around a lot. So you kind of go through where Joel's office was and where Richard's Donner's was to find screening room 5 if you're coming in from that parking lot. Um, but I saw the sign. I saw the sign for First Artist. Like, wow, cool.
So, how was Sinatra in the room?
He was a very nice man. I didn't have that much. I was always on the periphery because I was friends with I still am friends with Scott Lewis and
Mhm.
Jerry Lewis was really close with Frank. Jerry used to record a lot of his telephone conversations. Believe it or not, he would record things in his home.
Why?
If you went to interview him, if you were like a journalist and you were gonna go interview him, um, he'd record it. He had microphones around and he'd record this stuff. And I remember Scott telling me one time a journalist came to interview Jerry and um, the guy brought a little tape recorder with him and Jerry said, no, put that away. I'll send you a tape. You know, but I heard um, one of the sons got a hold of a tape that Jerry was doing something. I think it was for the telethon or must be just be related. And so he called Frank and he set the recorder up and it's whoever somebody picks up the phone. Frank, please. Who's calling? Jerry Lewis. Hold on one second, Mr. Lewis. And then he has this whole conversation with Frank about this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna set the band up, we're gonna do this and that. And Frank was just so cool. And Frank is like, no, look, I don't need all that. I'm coming in to help you. You're my friend. I love you. I'll do anything you want. But you don't have to go through all this stuff, And it
Hmm.
was just amazing. I mean, what an amazing friend to have,
Yeah.
you know? And then my wife and I spent many an evening with Patty Lewis when after Jerry and his first wife Patty had separated. Spent many an evening with her over the years, and she would tell stories about, and they all called each other Dago and Wop and Jew and stuff like that. So Patty's Patty was Italian, and her mother was born in Italy. I mean, she was that Italian or both her parents were. And but she said that there was something in the newspaper. Gary Lewis, Scott's older brother, who had the rock band, he there was some controversy and it ended up in the newspaper. So Patty's telling a story about how she gets phone call. Hey Dago, the WAP wants to talk to you. It's one of Frank's guys. Hey Dago, the WAP wants to talk to you. Okay. And then Frank gets on and hey, Hey, what am I reading in the paper? What can I help you? Is there something I can do to help? No, 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 Frank, we're okay, we're fine. Well, you let me know. You let me know if there's, anything. And um, and the thing is, that whole circle of friends all became very protective of one another after Frank Sinatra Jr. was kidnapped.
Yeah.
He had been kidnapped in the early 60s, and suddenly everybody in Bel Air and Beverly Hills suddenly became concerned that the same thing might happen to them.
What
And Jerry
about
was getting armed guards at the house, to watch the house and stuff.
what about the accusations that that was an inside job?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how to adjust those. I don't really know that much about it. I know it happened. I remember the newspaper accounts of it, but I never really looked into it,
Mm,
you know. So I can hear my
yeah.
lovely wife talking in the background. I'm on a Zoom call, sweetie. Okay.
Yeah, important stuff here. All right, so we've covered Scarecrow of Romney Marsh, classic. I'll actually okay a reboot of that.
Somebody should. I mean, I really think
Yeah,
that that is a classic piece of property, and there are ways to tell that story now. Because when you look at it, it seems kind of that just the way the sets were built and stuff. It's
right.
it's just amazing, and I think it can be improved because it was made for television. And at least Walt Disney had the foresight to know that color was coming eventually. And
Hmm.
so he shot these TV shows on film in color,
Yeah, smart.
you know?
They also did the Swamp Fox with
Yes, with Leslie
Leslie
Nielsen.
Nielsen.
Yeah, I love the Swamp Fox. I grew up loving that, you know.
Yeah,
And then I did
based
research.
on yeah, based on
Francis
Francis
Marion.
Marion, right? Yeah.
Francis Marion, yeah. And I did research on him for papers when I was in school and stuff because there were books. I still have a book that I bought when I was like 8 years old, called The Swamp Fox of the Revolution. And it's Landmark Books, which was a an imprint of Random House.
Yeah.
And when you read it, it's written for kids. But that's one of the possessions I've held on to for more than 50 years. Well, more than 60 years now. I mean, I'm in my 70s now. I've had that book since,
Well,
since
it's
like
got like that.
1961, or so,
Yeah,
you
it
know?
almost feels like an American Robin Hood type
Yeah,
story,
yeah, yeah.
taking down the crown. And there was the I don't know if it's true, but one of the legends about him was that his sword was rusted into his scabbard. That he, went on these raids, but was not really also one of the guys to commit a violent act. Does that make sense? Is that true?
I don't know. I don't know. I never heard
That
that.
But they also say that about
He
Butch
came
Cassidy that he
close.
hate Butch
Yeah,
Cassidy hated to take his gun out of his holster.
yeah, well, it could be. Um, I know Francis Marion came very, very close to being captured by the British before he became an ultra revolutionary. Like he was already a revolutionary. They wanted the British out, and there was some sort of a raid in Charleston, I believe, and the British had raided, and he jumped out a window, broke his ankle, but he was able to get away. And what the British were doing in those days was they would capture these people, then they'd let them go. They'd make them swear that they would never take up arms against the crown.
Hmm.
And those people lived up to their oaths in those days.
Yeah.
Unlike some of the people who take oaths of office these days. I'm looking at you guys on the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
So
We all are.
so so I think his brother had to take the oath. I don't remember the details. I remember reading about this. I've read several books about Francis Marion. I remember driving through South Carolina and looking on either side of I-95 because Marion's estate was became a hydroelectric thing. They flooded it, and it's now Lake Marion, and that was a hydroelectric plan with a dam and everything to create electricity for the people in that part of South Carolina. So I remember looking, where am I? I've got the map out. Okay, oh, here we are. This is Francis Marion's place underwater here. This is like 50 years ago. You
Yeah.
know? Yeah, that
That's
was really
awesome.
cool. I have that I bought that little tin DVD set too from Disney.
Yeah, that's a good one too. I mean, you got to admire like Walt Disney had ambition when it came to the projects he wanted to tackle. And he also had a love for like the American history side of things, the frontierland side of things, and
Yeah, yeah,
he did like Johnny Tremaine and yes, there was Robin Hood and Rob Roy and those English stories that because of his production funds being tied up in England. But Francis Marion's a good one, and I have to admit though, Leslie Nielsen's actually fairly convincing in the part.
yeah, he is.
Yeah.
And then there was Texas John Slaughter with Neville
Yes.
Brand
Yeah. Neville
and
Brand.
Alvego Baca, who was a Spanish,
Yeah.
that was in the New Mexico territory. It was Texas John Slaughter in Texas. Alvego Baca was a lawyer in the New Mexico territory, and I don't remember the actor. I'm picturing his face, but I don't remember the actor's name.
I love Neville Brand in what was it, Starlock 17?
Oh yeah, yeah,
And also he's got a moment of like sheer distress in Tora 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 where the guy's like, you need your confirmation that we're under attack. And like there's the night bombers are right outside his window and shit's blowing up and his building's shaking. And he's like, there's your affirmation. It's just like the typical Neville Brand level of intensity of like everything
yeah.
is at 11. But
There's
yeah,
a funny story about that movie because I don't know which of the networks it was, but one of the three big television networks,
mhm.
ran Tora 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 on the air the same week that Hirohito was visiting President Ford at
Convenient.
the White House.
On purpose, no doubt. No, I'm sure I'm sure they were aware. Do you think I bet it jumped the schedule. Play that right now. Kurosawa was supposed to direct the Japanese sequences to that.
Oh, really? Who did?
Yeah, I don't know who ultimately did it. Maybe
Because I
the
believe they
director of
did
it,
have a Japanese director for that. Richard Fleischer, I believe, did
Fleischer is
the
the
American. Yeah.
yeah, who did 20,000 Leagues. Speaking
Well,
of
he did the
Disney,
New Centurions. I was an
yeah,
extra in the New Centurions
with
back
George
in
C. Scott,
December.
was that
Yeah, yeah.
George? Yeah.
He wasn't there. He wasn't working the day I was. Um, I was there one night down on, believe it or not, Daly Street, down in near the General Hospital in Lincoln Heights.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where they were shooting. They were shooting this car chase thing. And Stacy Keach was there that night, and Eric Estrada was working that
Nice.
night. And Eric Estrada at the time was up and coming. Nobody had heard of him before. But he was an up and comer on there. Yeah, I was there. Yeah, I was December of 1971 is when early December when because I was cold. It was like, I hadn't been living in LA very long, and it's like, hey, it's supposed to be warm out here. It's supposed to be summertime all year round. It's cold here.
Yeah, the new Centurions. Wow, what a throwback. Next thing you know, we're going to start talking about Fort Apache, the Bronx.
No, I didn't have no, I had nothing to do with that.
I asked you, you did not work on the Wanderers, right? That was before
No,
your
no,
yeah.
I did not. I got to
Um,
Warner Brothers. I was in television with Lorimar in 1986 and got to the lot and to Warner Brothers Pictures in 1990.
those were the
So,
days.
so the first big movie, um, I wasn't there for the beginning. I was with Lorimar for the beginning of it, was Bonfire of the Vanities. And then I
Oof.
got to the lot, and I remember because I was on location doing Gabriel's Fire in the winter of 1990, early, like I think my first day there was like February 1st. I was there from February 1st until the middle of April in 1990. And
Holman
so
Luck.
we were shooting, yeah, Coleman Luck. We were shooting the pilot to Gabriel's Fire with James Earl Jones. And our production designer was sent the script for Bonfire of the Vanities. Now, when I left LA to go to Chicago, I took the book with me. My wife had just finished reading the book, the paperback, and I read that on the plane. And for the first couple nights that I was in Chicago doing the setup to start doing the pilot there. So the book was very fresh in my mind. And then our production designer got the script. I asked him if I could read it. And it was so funny because it was the printout, he had it printed out from a computer and it looked like that computer type, and the paper had creases on it, had it was serrated so you could tear the
Hmm.
pages off. The paper would come off and you'd tear it off and stuff. That's what his script was like. Serrated edges at the top and bottom where the paper had been torn, and then it wasn't computer font in the way the titles to 3 Days of Condor were, because that sort of dates that movie. But it wasn't it didn't look like typewriter font, because all these
Right.
scripts look like a typewriter did them. And so I read the script, and I was already brokenhearted when I read the script. I was brokenhearted about that movie already. And then I had to when I came into Warner Brothers Pictures, I got assigned to post-production from the estimating and budgeting department, and had to help complete the movie, for
So
them.
yeah, so you've mentioned 3 Days of the Condor, which I'm going to say, fun fact, you also make an appearance in that at the end.
I almost made it.
Were you cut out with Cliff
No, no,
Robertson,
no.
right?
What happened was the take they used. So when they're rolling camera, because I was just an extra, I was in a crowd scene in New York, and it was the Eighth Avenue. Times Square is where Broadway and Seventh Avenue meet. Okay,
Hmm.
so and it's named after the New York Times. It's Times Square. Okay, well, the New York
Right.
Times building is there, but the actual entrance to the New York Times building is on Eighth Avenue, so it's a block away. It's a very short block away from Times Square. So you know, I'm with a bunch of extras, but I'm also with the rest of the people, the 250,000 people that are in Times Square at any given moment, in those days, because now it looks like a park. They've closed it off the traffic and they have tables and chairs and stuff out there. But when it was real traffic running through there. And so as a rolling camera, a real honest to God truck pulls up and blocks all of us out, and that's the shot they use in the movie. So it's the scene where they're outside the New York Times building at the end. It's at the end of the movie where
Yeah.
Robert Redford is telling Cliff Robertson that this is where I've gone, and he's saying, how do you know they're going to print it? That's the big thing at the end. How do you know they're going to print it? But the truck, there's a truck in the back, and I totally got aced out because that's the shot they used.
Of
They shot it
course.
more than once, but
Such a great movie too, and Robertson is fantastic in it. So is the other actor that plays Wicks, the
yes,
CIA guy that goes out to actually try to whack him. But
yeah,
just the way they are, it's so funny because it's so tempting to get to cast someone who will chew the scenery in those scenes. And when the phone call comes in to Robertson's office, he is so low key and precise. And even when like they're getting the distress call at the command center and
yeah.
this is the major, and he's like, identify yourself, and he's like, he can't even recall his own code
Oh,
name
oh,
at first.
Condor, yeah, yeah,
Yeah. And then he's got to use the other code names for everyone
yeah,
else. And they're asking if he's armed. And they say, like, stay out there for 3 hours and then we're going to contact. All these great procedural things that take place. And then I guess they go, if I remember right, they go out to his apartment and he catches
yes,
them there. Right. And
yeah.
so he
Well,
backtracks.
his landlady sees him and says, "Oh, your friends are waiting for you," and they told him not to
Right.
go there.
Yeah.
They told
Yeah.
him, "Don't go home," and he did. Your
And
friends are
yeah, he
waiting for
goes
you.
home. And he
Yeah,
says on the phone later, because I was homesick.
yeah, yeah.
But it
It's
was just great where he's like,
and you and I, we should tell people listening to this or watching it on YouTube that there are frequently times when I will text you a little clip
yeah,
of Robert Redford on the phone
yeah,
saying,
yeah.
"Is it true the condor is an endangered species?"
Such a brilliant movie, though. Yeah, and I love getting those texts. I love getting those texts because of
I
what
do
they
that to
mean
my
and just the
brother too, because my
oh
brother loves that movie as much as you do. And I gave him a gift late last year, not Christmas. It was before Christmas. They Paramount put out a 4K, ultra high def Blu-ray of Three
yeah,
Days at the Condor, and you could buy it. When you got it, it was the 4K version and a Blu-ray version. So you had both, the high def and ultra high def. And I sent that to my brother, and he said, I don't have a player to play this on. And I said, oh man, Okay, you need to go into Amazon and this is what you want. Okay. Sony had put out a 4K player. It was like $70. I mean, it was, you know what I mean? Remember
Yeah,
how expensive Blu-ray players were?
right.
Even DVD players when they first came out. And now you can get a 4K ultra high def Sony for $70. And he did. I mean, he did. He bought it there,
So the
there then.
only actor from 3 Days of the Condor who's done the show is Hank Garrett, who plays the mailman
The
assassin.
mailman. Yeah.
And we could not get enough inside the 3 Days of the Condor speak from this dude. Like
Yeah.
he had done GI Joe, and I think he was a professional wrestler. He had a really unique career, Twilight Zone, but no, it was 3 Days of the Condor, which I
Yeah.
think was based on a book called 7 Days of the Condor. Like,
7 or 5, yeah, something like
yeah,
that.
he
I
got
have
like
the
a few
book.
more days in the book.
I do have the book somewhere, yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember Siskel and Ebert making the comment about, having to cut it down. This, and it
Yeah.
was a negative comment. What they were making was a negative comment about how they
Were
cut
they?
it down to, yeah.
So it should have been what, 2 days? One day of the
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I took it negatively. I was, I was always of the opinion, incorrectly, that the movie didn't do well, and it turns out it did. I looked it up. After I sent my brother the 4K um, Blu-ray, I was looking it up because I was going to talk to him and say, hey, it's a pity it didn't do better, but I looked it up and it did great box office. It didn't do, Godfather box office, but it did really well for 1975.
Oh, absolutely captivating, especially when they go to what is it like the import export office, and John Houseman is doing the rundown on who
Oh
this guy
God.
might be, and he's like,
Yeah.
"Is he a soldier of fortune?" And
Yeah.
then Robertson's going, "No, he went to college on the GI Bill. What we have here is a guy that reads everything."
Everything. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's a big advertisement for getting literate and reading, but
Yeah.
it's just the way they break him down and the way they look at the whole. It's just
Well, and the
enthralling. And
setup
Max von
and the setup
Sydow,
for all that reading too, when the guys are in the office and they're
mhm,
talking about, a person is killed, there's an entry wound, no exit wound, and there's no
right?
bullet in there. And Robert Redford's character, Joe Turner says, ice. They
Yeah,
froze it. They froze it. It's a bullet made of ice. Where did you get that? Dick Tracy. Oh, he was
yeah.
reading comic books or the comic strips too. Dick
Yeah, but he
Tracy.
follows it up. It's either Dick Tracy or like Dashiell Hammett. It's one of those guys, but he follows it up with like actually an underrated detective. He
Yes.
like he's got it all like the entire catalog of cases on his bear. But it's just such a great setup and the way they work in that office, and you don't know what they do. But the idea that somebody stumbles on something accidentally that
Yeah.
gets everyone killed is just a
Yes.
great trigger for a story. And
Yeah.
Redford really sold it. And honestly, uh Sidney Pollock was in a hot streak right there. Like he was firing on all cylinders. Your boy, who you tried to trick with the interpreter, Bill Daly tried to trap Pollock, and Pollock did not take the bait. Either he
No, he
knew
did
he
not
was
take
being
the
baited
bait.
or.
No, no,
Anyway, tell the
no.
story. So the interpreter comes out. He directed that. You didn't like the sound mix on it or
Yeah, the
something? And
sound mix I thought was just terrible. And
yeah,
I couldn't understand why, because the sound supervisor on that was Scott Hecker, who was a
right.
very, very good supervising sound editor. The crew were all, really they are people I would have hired, you know.
Hmm.
That's how I measure people, would I have hired them?
Right.
you know. And so the sound, all the sound editors were people I would have hired. And then it was mixed at Universal, and I'm trying to think who the mixer was. I'm picturing his face, um, but I mean, you don't become the lead mixer at a studio facility like Universal if you're not any good. I mean, they
Right.
were all everything about it was like top notch, but the end result was just terrible. And I thought maybe it was the theater I saw it in, I just, and then I got the DVD and the DVD was awful, just awful. And I just couldn't figure out how that could come out so badly. you
So
know?
what happened? Didn't you see him like at an islands or something?
Yeah,
You saw
yeah,
him.
we were doing a research screening of Michael Clayton. So Mark Solomon and I, and it was at the Paseo, Colorado in Pasadena. So Mark Solomon and I got there early, and we figured we'd go get something to eat. And I said, let's just go to Islands. That'll be quick. And Islands was packed. It was packed. So then I said, can we just sit at the bar then? Because they have a bar in the back, and you can
Hmm.
sit in there. Oh yeah, yeah. So we went there, and Sidney Pollack was sitting there at the bar. So we sat next to him. I think we sat on either side of him, to tell you the truth. And Mark said something to him. Um, and Sydney was like, oh my God. His reaction, the visible reaction was, and I didn't hear what Mark said to him, but Sydney's had this like panicked look on his face. And then Mark said, no, 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 we're at the studio. I'm just joshing with you. And then Sydney suddenly settled down, and then we could talk to him, you know?
Right.
And I'd asked him, because I couldn't remember exactly. I thought he did 3 days of Condor, but I wasn't 100% sure. So I asked him, you did 3 days of Condor, right? And he said, yeah, yeah, I did that. Yeah, I told him I was in college at the time. I was an extra there in outside the New York Times building at the, and
Yeah.
he was so cool. And then so I kind of eased into conversation with him about that. And then I asked him about the interpreter. I asked him, so when you did the interpreter, were you rushing to make a release date? Was there pressure on you to do anything? Was Universal? And he said, no. It's like, that's it. He didn't say, why do you ask? And
No, no, because he knows. That's the trick with the answer. He knows you know something, and he has probably a sense of where you're going. So
Yeah,
he
could
knows not to
be.
give you any railroad.
Yeah, I guess so. It could be.
Yeah,
Yeah, it
he
probably
was
is
very
because he's a
smart.
smart guy. Yeah,
Yeah.
smart guy.
So he knew
You know,
because you're
and he
coming
was a
at
really good actor too. When you
he
see him in
was.
Tootsie,
Yeah.
he's not as good in Eyes Wide Shut, but that's because Stanley wasn't that good a director. Look on your face.
So all right, so there's a lot about him, and first of all, he replaced Harvey Keitel, but
Yeah,
Leon Vitali, who we both knew,
yeah,
a good friend with my wife as well, who handled the Kubrick archives. He was Kubrick's assistant from
right.
like the Dawn of Time, The Shining, or something. Cast the little boy in The Shining, but he had said that he replaced Harvey Keitel, and they shot that pool hall scene like for 2 days where he answers the door and it's Tom Cruise.
Yeah,
And he
yeah.
said that Sidney Pollack finally goes, "Look, Stanley, we've been doing this for 2 days. I mean, I've been answering this door for the last, week and a half or something like that." He's like, "I'm pretty sure we got it." And,
Not sure we got it.
and Stanley Kubrick's like, "Well, I know, Sidney, but don't you want to do it right?"
I think the problem with Stanley was after having to watch that movie a million times, because we
Mm,
were we were Leon and Nigel Galt. Nigel Galt was the editor on that, I believe. I believe Nigel was the editor, or else he was the set supervising sound editor. I
right.
think he was the editor though, and they had a deal. It was in Stanley's deal that all the release printing be done by Deluxe instead of Technicolor. We had an
Hmm.
overall deal with Technicolor. Um, but Deluxe, um, at that time, when that movie was done, 1997, I want to say,
Right.
um, Deluxe was doing better work. It would ebb and flow. The differences between Deluxe and Technicolor would ebb and flow.
Hmm.
So, but at that time, 1997, the Deluxe actually was doing better work than Technicolor was. So Stanley was kind of right to assert his right to do that. That was in his deal. So Stanley died during post on there, and Nigel and Leon and Stanley's widow finished the movie, finished cutting and approving, all the stuff at the movie. And then they came out here because the labs in London don't move as quickly as the labs here. So they came out here to supervise the release printing, and they were checking, honest to God, they were checking every goddamn print that was coming out of the lab. They
Right.
were checking QC. Yeah, I don't know how many times they saw that movie. I saw it enough times. Um, but I digress. Um, I think Stanley got in his head what these characters were supposed to sound like. So for me, when I watch it, I feel like every shot, like every printed take in that movie was take 85
Yeah.
because the actors just seem exhausted to me and they've resorted down to this like sing-songy dialogue sort of thing instead of really connecting with the other actor and delivering the line honestly. So the dialogue has this sing-songy sort of thing to it, and
Yeah.
and that's what Stanley printed, and that's not Sidney's way style of acting, you know. But he got what he wanted because he broke the actors down and exhausted them so much that, and I think Stanley, I don't know what, Hitchcock was the same way in a lot of ways, where everything was storyboarded and everything had to match the storyboard. And he was even quoted as saying, "It's a shame to have to shoot the movie because it's already done in my head and it's already on paper with the storyboards." But that approach doesn't allow for any kind of improvisation. It doesn't allow you to capture a moment, a real moment that might happen, you know?
So Kubrick makes an appearance in it, right?
Where is he?
He's in the jazz club where Tom Cruise goes to meet his buddy.
Uh-huh.
I mean, Kubrick had a sense of humor with his productions that I'm not sure Kubrick enthusiasts are all completely prepared to embrace. But Leon would tell stories about Stanley that were like almost borderline mischievous.
Oh
You
yeah,
know
I
that he,
can I get a sense of mischief about Stanley. Yeah.
yeah. And one of the things Leon said was on the set of The Shining, the scene where they're talking about The Shining in the kitchen, and he asks him if he wants ice cream, and he's going on and on and on, and he's trying to get a sense of this kid. He said that they went way like until 2 in the morning to do that. And it was for that very reason that he felt the actor hadn't cracked the rhythmic code on how to say those lines. And Leon said something like, shouldn't we just break and come back tomorrow? And Stanley's logic was, if we come back tomorrow, we're at square one. He's going to have to
Yeah.
do it 10 times or 20 times to get in the rhythm. And he hasn't cracked it yet here, but he's
Right.
close. So if we stay, we'll probably get it in a take or two. But if we start again tomorrow, we're going to be doing this
It's all
again all
day.
day.
Right.
Yeah. So it was interesting that he did try to get that place where the actors would have a sort of voice and diction that he felt was right. But Pollock is good in the movie. I know
Yeah.
that he wasn't, the part wasn't intended to be his, but Leon told me a funny story that we were at the Ray Stark bar. Did I tell you this? Kubrick's
No.
archives show up at LACMA. So Leon, Loda, and I and a few friends were like, let's go see it. Right. So we're at the Ray Stark bar having drinks, and he's talking about Eyes Wide Shut because there was a couple pieces from the film. And somehow Leon did a lot of Stanley's preliminary casting, or if not casting altogether. And one of the things he was talking about, because in Eyes Wide Shut, he's Red Cloak. Well, he's eight
Yeah.
different characters.
Yeah. Yeah.
He shows up eight different times, but he's the
Yeah.
guy in the middle. Is like, excuse me, sir, do you have the password? That's right. That is the password. That guy. So he said, yeah, I did that. And it was interesting because I had to cast all those actresses for that big scene
Oh.
or cast all the women, he said. I
All
said,
the
you
women for when they're getting
right,
selected for the orgy stuff. Yeah.
right. So
Yeah.
he said, we put the call out. Somehow he came up, he started to explain. Somehow he started to explain. He's like, we put the call out for like 2 or 3 thousand women for those roles. And I was like, you had to sit through auditions of 2 or 3 thousand actresses? And he corrected me. He goes, I wouldn't really consider them actresses, really. They were more like close proximity entertainers. But he's like, I had to have it recorded because he didn't want any of them to come through
Yes.
and like claim something happened that didn't happen or was inappropriate in the casting session. So he put everything on tape, every interaction, nonstop. It was interesting, and he is, it's funny because he broke it down for me. He's like 2 or 3 guys in a row that Tom Cruise interacts with. It's like the guy who takes his coat, the guy who shows him in the room, the guy in the balcony that looks down at him. And then he's like, he showed how like Stanley would just say, Leon, get up there, grab a mask and get up there. And it was that informal at times with
Right.
them, which was it was interesting to hear him sort of give you like a creative timeline of how Tom Cruise enters this party, and Leon is like basically the guy who's running around the camera in a sense. And
And in my mind, I'm wondering if Stanley Pollock's character isn't one of the people staring down on him. That knowing stare,
yeah,
especially,
well, I
um,
think the character is clearly supposed to be there, correct? Right? Don't
yeah,
they reveal that? But is
I
it
believe
actually
so.
Stan?
Yeah.
But
Well,
is it actually
but
Sydney?
Sydney knew all about it. I don't remember the character's name, but Sydney
Yeah,
knew all about Tom Cruise having been there that night, the night before,
yeah,
you know.
yeah. And
And
look,
and and they bring him because it's not at the orgy, it's somewhere else where Sidney Pollack has the girl that OD'd.
yeah, earlier on at his Christmas party.
Right. And then she dies,
Hmm.
and then Tom checks her out in the morgue. I mean, another prurient Stanley,
Yeah,
so much of that stuff was just Stanley living in his sex fantasies. I just, I just,
yeah.
I can't help but laugh and I'm sure that I am just the worst blasphemer to all of the Stanley Kubrick fans that are out there,
Oh,
and
I
they are
know, I know.
legion,
Yeah,
which is why Stanley had a home at Warner Brothers because Bob and Terry understood that you might want to have your logo on this guy's movies,
yeah,
and not
yeah.
everything is a home run. Some of them aren't even singles, um, but there's such a legion of diehard fans that it's worth having. And Stanley didn't spend that much money making them.
Well, that's the thing, right? There wasn't it wasn't like monstrous cost for him to deliver a
Right.
film. He had a small crew. But the thing about it that's interesting is that the Stanley Kubrick nation takes very personal offense if you criticize the art. They think you're attacking them because they love it. And
Right.
I say the same thing with Eyes Wide Shut. It should be about 45 minutes shorter and a better resolution. I thought it was kind of a tacked on. And
It,
man, people,
what was nice for me was they did a fabulous job of creating a New York feel
yeah.
on the back lot at Pinewood. And Lily Sobieski, it's the first time we
Mm,
ever saw her, and she was delightful. And then you see her work in other movies and stuff, and there's something about it. There's something the camera loves her. She has
mm,
star quality. I don't know what she's doing now, but 27 years ago, she had star quality. We visited Pinewood. Patty and I visited Pinewood about this time in 1997 when they were shooting Eyes Wide Shut. And I remember Warner Brothers at the time had two bungalows at Pinewood Studios, and that was our home. Pinewood was our home in London. And I remember the guys that worked there, they had a small staff of people, and they were like, "Oh, Bill, um, you can get us on the set of Eyes Wide Shut, right?" Because Stanley's
whoa.
still shooting. And I said, no, absolutely not. Because you know what's going to happen? We're going to get kicked off. And word is going to get out incorrectly that Bob
Hmm.
Daly got kicked off, not Bill Daly. And I am not going to carry that burden with me back to Burbank.
No.
Okay. Because it'll be misinterpreted that he kicked Bob off. And that just wasn't true.
Did
So we got kicked off of the Tomorrow Never Dies set on the 007 stage instead.
Right. Look, if you're going to get kicked off a set, get kicked off. If you're going to get kicked off a set, get kicked off a Bond set, not a Stanley Kubrick set. But no, Leon told. Did you ever hear the story, Leon? Did he ever tell you the story about when he asked Stanley Kubrick for a night off?
No.
So Stanley and Leon was famous for saying Stanley would take your right arm and then ask, "What's the matter with you? Why is this all you have to give me?" But Leon, there was a movie playing at some like vintage cinema in England, and it was like a retro piece from the 60s. And they had a print and they were going to screen it. And Leon loved this filmmaker. And so he had to go ask Stanley, could he get off early to go see another filmmaker's movie?
Yeah.
So he's walking towards Stanley Kubrick, and Stanley Kubrick's like working on something, a lens or something, and he looks up, and you could just feel the camera dolly in on Stanley like he's a Bond villain, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
so and he knows Leon's coming to report or ask something. So Leon walks up to him. And he's like, Stanley, I was wondering if I could get off early tonight. And Stanley's like, and he to this day he thinks Stanley knew why he was asking, but Stanley still goes like Sidney Pollack. Uh, why, Leon? Why do you want to get off early? And Leon swears he knew that he was going to ask to go see this filmmaker. He
Yeah.
says, well, so and so's got this film, and I forget which filmmaker it was. Somebody who did a thing like where the scenes in heaven were in color and the rest of the movie's black and white. It was something like that. And he goes, well, so and so's movie screening about a mile away, and I thought I'd go see it. And Stanley Kubrick just kind of has this like total put down vibe of like, oh really? Do you like that kind of thing? Do you do you really want to go? If you really, and he like totally shamed him. He was like, if you feel like that's gonna make your evening, better, Leon, then by all means, yeah, go see it. But it was like totally dismissive.
I know there's that passive aggressive sort of thing, and Stanley did have sort of an aggressive nature. I'll give you
Hmm.
that. Um, Leon's mistake was that he should have said, Stanley, they're screening. You're not going?
Yeah,
You're not coming with me?
right,
You
right,
know?
right. Yeah, it's
Well, you don't want, oh, and if you don't want to go, I'll go and I'll let you know how it is. I'll report back to you. I'll come
yeah,
back tonight.
exactly.
I'll come back immediately afterwards and I'll tell you how it is.
Yeah, let me tell you how this
And
is.
even as it went, with just the way it went, okay, I did Leon go or not go?
Oh, he went. I think he
Okay.
did go.
Leon
Isn't
should
that
have
funny?
gone back, but Leon should have gone back to Pinewood and they should have said, Stanley, you were so right.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know?
Yeah, that's exactly what he should have done. I mean, Leon over the years has really humanized Stanley Kubrick, for us anyway, because like the reputation has these immortal qualities to it, but he really did tell stories that were funny and endearing and you know,
There's always stuff like that that happens on a movie set. I mean, it
yeah,
could be the most horrible movies. I'll bet at some point on Rust, they were having fun,
right.
you know? So there's always some horrible movie being made, but people do get gag reels out of everything. Okay. And that was actually a requirement for us, was that you had to deliver a gag reel with all the rest of your stuff. Honest to God,
Hmm.
that's in the delivery requirements
Smart. People
to
love it.
deliver a gag reel. And what used to happen is back in the old days when Jack Warner was running the place, um, they ran the gag reel at Christmas. They'd have a big Christmas party on stage, maybe 16 or probably 18. They'd have a big Christmas party for everybody, and they would actually run the gag reel at the Christmas parties.
Hmm.
We did that at Lorimar. When I was at Lorimar, we were at MGM, and we would have the parties in the mill, and they'd put up a big screen, and they'd run the gag reels too.
Who had the best gag reel?
Oh God. Um, I don't even know. I don't. I mean, they all. When I think about gag reels, I'm taken back to Warner Brothers had put out a DVD of, well, actually several. They put out several things publicly of gag reels over the years, and that's
Hmm.
generally what I think of when I think of gag reels. I'm thinking in black and white because those are the ones that are truly hilarious. When you see
Yeah.
Betty Davis screwing up and then start cursing and everything, and Ronald Reagan, and Errol Flynn. I mean, that's what I remember. So when I try to think of gag reels, that's what comes to mind.
The funniest that comes to mind for me is Guardians of the Galaxy, actually, where there's just some absolute epic comedic moments that some of it they should have left dead. It's actually better than the cuts
Uh,
they used.
yeah.
But anyway,
Well, wasn't it great in being there when they over the end credits they're putting in gag
yeah,
reels,
yeah,
and Cannonball Run did the same thing.
yeah.
They're putting in gag reels over the end credits
Let's
or
be
under
honest though,
the end credits.
with Cannonball Run, it was the best part of the movie though. And Burt Reynolds himself said, somebody interviewed him and said, "How do you live with yourself taking $5 million to do Cannonball Run?" Did you see this?
No.
And Burt Reynolds' response was, well, the only thing more hideous than offering someone $5 million for doing a movie like Cannonball Run is not taking it.
Yes. Yes.
It's not taking
I
the money.
liked Cannonball Run though. That's a fun
Great concept.
movie.
Great
It's a
concept.
fun, but it's a fun movie. Now, Cannonball Run 2, that's that's blasphemy. Okay.
Yeah.
Doing it again, like doing the Sting 2 and the Sting 3. I mean, that is
Yeah.
blasphemous.
Well, that's what they do, right? They,
Yeah. Well, yeah, you hook onto the movies are very expensive to make.
yeah,
And if you get a working formula, you want to go with it. I mean, the Marvel universe it's like mining gold, for
yeah.
Disney. But I think people are kind of overloaded. There's super saturation of superheroes. I'm not. I was never a Marvel fan. I've seen a couple of them, and I don't like they're okay, but I'm not a huge. I don't go in for that. I
So
don't.
I
I don't
came,
denigrate them
no, of
because
course not.
but because there is an audience out there that loves them. It's just that my
Well,
tastes run differently, and I'm sure they don't want to denigrate my taste.
we don't have to denigrate him because we've got Scorsese for that. Speaking of which, there was an evening.
Even Marty needs to lighten
Yeah.
up. I mean, the Irishmen need to be that long, 3 hours and 30 minutes long. I mean, I sat
No.
through it at the Academy because I got invited to the Academy to see it because I'm in the Screen Actors Guild, and they did the Q&A with everybody. I mean, even Ray Romano was there, down to his character. Um, and and I positioned myself so that I wouldn't disturb people to get up to go to the men's room. Luckily, I made it through the whole movie without having to do that. But I even positioned myself in an inferior seat so that I could slip away when I needed to. And the capper of all was that it was on Netflix. I didn't need to go to a screening at all. I didn't need to drive
Right.
through rush hour traffic to get to Beverly Hills and then pay an arm and a leg to park, you know, and then have to find my way home over the construction that was happening on Robertson Boulevard trying to get to the 10 freeway. I mean, so I put in quite a commitment to go see that screening.
Yeah, you did.
That's the thing. And I could have seen it on Netflix at home and paused it. I could have had some beers.
Yeah,
And
you could have actually made Irish stew. You could have made Irish stew in the time it takes to watch them. I mean, I think he did it because he wanted to have a long movie and he doesn't know when to cut sometimes.
Well, that's the thing. When we did The Departed, and The Departed, um, my The Departed is a much better movie than I gave it credit for when we were doing it. I got so sick of spending the afternoon with gangsters watching the
Yeah.
dailies on that movie, But still, Leo was great. Jack was great. I mean, everything about it was really, really good. But but for me,
Mm.
it's based on Infernal Affairs, the Korean movie, and for me, that Korean movie's better, and it's
Hmm.
shorter. It's like 20 minutes to a half hour shorter,
Right.
you know?
I my only experience with Scorsese was in screening room 12. Katie Lang was hosting a charitable screening of Kundun.
Uh-huh.
And Loda and I went, and there was like 12 people at this screening until about 10 other lamas showed up, Dalai Lama type from like the Tibetan monk in
Yeah,
from like the
right.
Tibetan temple in North Hollywood. So that rounded it out to like 20 people. And Scorsese showed up, introduced the movie, and talked for about 45 minutes to like the 12 of us on the film, which was
Yeah,
actually really generous. A lot of times
yeah.
people show up for these charity screenings and they shake hands and leave, but he went
I
on and on and
like
on and
I
blamed
like Marty.
Titanic, by the way.
Yeah, I like Marty. I like working with him. But he's it's been a bit of a downward slide, and I'm going to have to explain this. It was a bit of a downward slide since Goodfellas. Okay, so when Goodfellas, we did not that long after Bonfires of the Vanities. So I was finishing up on Goodfellas too when I first got to Warner's, and My Blue Heaven. I mean, what a piece of crap that was too. But
Did you know?
Goodfellas was just like right on the money. Every beat was perfect, everything, and it was perfectly on time, perfectly on budget and everything. But the difference was that his producer was his wife, Barbara DeFina, at the time,
Hmm.
and they later broke up. I thought we might actually develop a relationship with Marty and he'd stay at Warner Brothers, but he went to Universal. He did a deal with Universal. And eventually Barbara and he broke up. He came back um, because he was going to do, there were times when he came back before The Departed, but I think Departed was in the next actual movie he did for us. There's like a 20-year gap.
Yeah.
Um, so Departed, but in the meantime, there was Gangs of New York. That was ours. We developed that movie, but it became too expensive to make for us because of, the business model we had and the whole thing about
Right.
Warner Brothers calling and all. So that went to Miramax. They shot that in Italy, went to Miramax. And then Hugo, and I think Hugo was after The Departed. Hugo, I loved that project. That was like so cool. And we couldn't get Marty to shoot it in 3D. But then it ended up at Paramount, and he shot it in 3D for Paramount. I mean, that was the only thing for us because all of our analytics showed that we were going to lose money unless we did it in 3D. And Marty didn't want to shoot it in 3D because he had no experience with that. I think it terrified him in a way because it was an unknown thing. But
Right.
Paramount got him to shoot it in native 3D as opposed to doing a conversion. And I don't know what that added to the cost, but but our algorithms and stuff showed us that we were going to lose money on that project unless we had a 3D version of it to put out. It's like Harry Potter, the very final Harry Potter was in 3D. And that movie was greenlit. I couldn't believe it was greenlit at the cost that of what that budget was. I couldn't believe that Alan Horn actually greenlit that movie. But you, but in it, but also we couldn't not make that movie because we already made all the others. How could you not wrap it up and not do the final movie? So they took a leap of faith and did the final one, and then it ended up being two movies. And it wasn't two movies for the price of one because we had to pay the actors all over again, like it was a separate movie. Um,
Right.
but that movie would have lost.
The famous Salkind producing
Oh
Conundrum.
yeah, yeah. But that movie would have lost money if we didn't do the 3D conversion. And the only way you could compete with Harry Potter in those days, and it's been more than a decade now, but the only way you could compete with Harry Potter was to do a 3D movie
Right.
because while Potter's playing in all the mainstream 2D screens, somebody could sneak in a 3D thing there and suddenly get a decent box office against this juggernaut that was Harry Potter. But we spent $10 million to do a 3D conversion, and that decision alone brought us over $100 million back at the box office. And that's why the movie ended up in the black. It would have been in the red otherwise.
So did you know that My Blue Heaven is also based on Henry Hill?
Is it really?
Yeah.
No shit.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's today's fun fact about mafia movies. But here's the thing I was going to ask you because I found some old photographs of when I was giving my family a tour of the Last Samurai set because Kyoto was built on the Warner Brothers backlot and it
Yeah,
was fantastic.
right.
And there were stages like I think the home for Tom Cruise. I think that was done on the stage next to the
Well,
commissary.
all the interiors would have
Yeah.
been done. But isn't it amazing how they turned that little town from Dukes of Hazzard into
Yeah.
Kyoto? You know?
It's unreal. And I remember a friend of mine, James Liu, Big Trouble in Little China, did some stunt work on it and he had to pull the rickshaw. He's like that was his moment. But I remember I found some photos of me showing my mother the sets and she was just blown away. It was like old time movie magic to her, and she had some experience at Warner Brothers, but it was like the way they looked and the in-depth sort of they also used the swamp set back there. Or what is it, the jungle? They
In the
called it the
jungle, yeah, where
jungle.
they had
Yeah.
that pond, the
Yeah.
what was that
We're
TV
want
show? The something I forget. There was a TV show that Dana Delaney was in. It was Vietnam
Oh,
era.
China Beach.
China Beach, right? China Beach. Yeah, back there,
Right,
that
China
pond,
Beach.
that whole pond, China
Yeah.
Beach.
I was there, man, when The Rock shot an episode of Star Trek there. Do you remember that?
No.
Yeah, he did an episode of Star Trek and he played like an alien or something. But anyway, they really built these fantastic sets for Last Samurai. Whatever you make of the movie, I actually think it's pretty entertaining, although
My
I am,
mother-in-law loved it,
yeah,
and my
that's what,
mother-in-law was Japanese.
okay, there you
She
go.
loved it. She thought the only criticism, and it wasn't really a criticism, the one thing she pointed out was she didn't think the lead actress in it, the Japanese actress, would have surrendered herself so quickly to the guy Gene, the white guy
Mm,
in Tom Cruise. But otherwise she loved that movie. She just thought it was wonderful.
yeah, she had no problem with him being skilled enough to take on some ninja assassins,
No,
multiple ninjas at once.
no, it was done in a believable way. And Ed Zwick, um, no, he knows how to tell a story. It's
He
not
does.
his stuff isn't always to my taste, but he knows how to tell a story and he knows how to please a crowd. And Ed really, it's funny. I had this conversation with James Horner, believe it or not. Um, Ed really thought he was going to get an Oscar for that movie,
No
but
doubt.
what happened with the movie was it underperformed at the box office because it came out during a nor'easter. I mean, you can't adjust release schedules for the weather, but it got released because they wanted to qualify for the Oscars and all that stuff. And it had a late November, early December release date, and a nor'easter hit and blew up the box office for everybody, including that movie. And it's a shame because it's a really classy movie, you know?
It's well done. Do you remember do you remember that day the writer's laptop went missing and they shut the lot down?
No, if you know what, if they shut down London every time David Heyman's laptop went missing,
Yeah,
it's
no, they
multiple laptops with David Heyman.
you couldn't leave the parking lot without getting your bag searched. They found my laptop. Security pulled my laptop and they got on the phone and the guy's like, I've got a laptop here. Keep in mind, this isn't not everyone was traveling with laptops in these days.
Right.
And it wasn't the make that was stolen, so I was allowed to keep it and progress. But it was just one
Yeah.
of those funny things where they went on panic because I guess the rewrites were on this laptop at one point
Right.
for Last Samurai. And but
Did they ever find it? I don't
they
remember
must
that.
have. They must have found
I
it.
was doing I was busy doing one of the Potters, no doubt, when that movie was going.
Probably. But I'll tell you, that movie, in a sense, sort of reestablishes your belief on what can be done on a back lot.
Oh yeah.
Because Kyoto was beautiful. That was so well done.
Yeah. There was a period of time, there was about 3 or 4 years when my boss was Amy Rabins in budgeting and estimating. Um, and she used to say all the time, because we were budgeting these things to go off to New Zealand and go off to this place and that place. And she would always be, where's the magic in that? Seriously, where's the magic in going off to some distant location that's going to be really, really expensive and arduous? Why would you go to Machu Picchu? I mean, nobody does that, but why would you go there? Where's the magic, the movie magic, in going there and putting up at that altitude and getting all the people in and out? And when you could do that on a back lot. You remember Jack Frost? What a great job they did with the back lot on Jack Frost. That was amazing. That was an amazing thing. And it was like in the summertime. You had all that snow out there, and it's
Yeah,
like
yeah.
it's summertime.
Exceptional work, man. I mean, and to keep in mind though, we were there also when they demoed that Western town, which was sort of gut wrenching to experience. But to go back
Yeah, but
there and see what they could do with it,
but
unreal.
I understood the necessity because nobody was making Westerns anymore. We weren't even doing, because we had Briscoe County Jr. there. That was a TV show, and that was in the 90s. And Warner Village wasn't built until about 2005, I want to say, maybe as early as 2004, but
Yeah,
certainly like 2005 or 2006. And so I understood the necessity of using the space because that Western Street wasn't being used for anything except a stop on the tours and for parties. Remember they would have parties back there? They would
Yeah.
do, for whatever reasons, and there would be some party back there. And it was infested with rats because there wasn't enough human presence there, and the rats were all over the rafters and all that wooden stuff. So they tore it down and they built Warner Village, which was supposed to be a New England town. It looks more like New Jersey to me than New England, but that's okay. Um, and I remember Steve Papazian telling them we were in one of those studio-wide meetings on a Wednesday morning, and Steve Papazian told the guys from the facility, if you're going to build back there, okay, build practical buildings, okay, because we need office space. There's not enough space here for production offices and stuff. Build that. Everybody knows the rules.
Hmm.
When somebody's shooting, you don't park there and they have priority and you have to come in the back doors and everything. Everybody knows the rules. So
Right.
just build practical buildings and they did. And every one of those
Yeah.
buildings is occupied with
No,
somebody.
it looked like Cape Cod back there. It was hard to believe there was a Wild West set at one
Yeah,
point.
I know. I
So
know.
that so that's one of my favorite sets in my tour of duty there was The Last Samurai. Although Solaris, that was a great set too, what they had done on that stage. What was your favorite set to visit in terms of what they had
Oh,
done with art direction?
oh, Dave.
Dave, right? The White House.
Yeah, Dave. Well, they
Yeah.
took over the partition was out between 12 and 18. So it
Hmm.
took up that entire space and literally like built half the White House in there. I mean, they had the upstairs, half of the upstairs residence, the president's residence there. They had the entire. They did have the entrance because there's doing a tour. Remember, the one of the actresses is giving a tour of the
Yeah.
place. Okay, we're moving, and we stopped. Now, and Frank Langella would walk through.
Yeah. 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 That's
Um,
funny.
so they built some of the state floor. They built the Oval Office. They built the Cabinet Room. They did not build the Roosevelt Room. They put up a psych. They had a backdrop of the view from the south part of the White House, so you got to see the National Mall, the Washington Monument, and the Jefferson Memorial out there. I mean, it's beautiful backdrop. The whole thing was great. And I
Hmm.
remember Kurt Newman had asked me. Remember Kurt Newman? He was the
Yeah.
guy I did the Steven Seagal script with. In fact, it was a
Well,
Dave script that I gave him that had Steven Seagal's
oh,
stuff on it.
bro, you cannot tell part of a Steven Seagal story here. Come
Yeah,
on.
but we
All
no,
right.
we've already gone through this. We've already done
Oh,
this story.
we're assuming the audience knows what
Well,
we're talking
we'll
about,
stick
so
a
you're gonna
pin
have
in
to
it. We'll come
circle
back
back.
to it. But Kurt Newman had come to me. His office was only like 30 feet from mine when we were in building 36. And he came back to my office and he said, you used to work at the White House. Can you come over and look at the set for us? And I
Hmm.
said, sure. Now I don't want to give everybody a wrong impression. I didn't work at the White House. I was a White House correspondent when I was in college. So so I was very familiar with the White House. I was familiar with the West Wing and the Oval Office and everything. I'd been in the real building, and those real rooms. So I went in and the press room was wrong. I told them the press room is actually a mirror image of what you have. But I don't think anyone's going to notice, so don't worry about it. But I didn't want to be that guy who was such a perfectionist that, I did point out, the wood parquet here between the carpet and the threshold
There
to
you
the
go.
door that goes out to the rose garden. There's actually scratches in the real thing from Eisenhower wearing his golf shoes. You can see them. I knew they were there, so I looked.
Hmm.
So, but it was just amazing how precise that whole thing was. And I remembered them calling me. He asked them to call me, and it wasn't just them, because Alcon did a movie with oh, I forget, um, Mark Harmon called it was about
Was it
the it was about the
was it the
president's
Presidio?
daughter. No, it was about the president's daughter. He played Mark Harmon played president, and it wasn't First Daughter. That Katie Holmes did that movie, and that was Jeff Downer produced that. I think at Universal or Fox. But there was a movie that Alcon did about something about the first daughter, and I told both of them, if you go out to the Reagan Library, they built a replica of the Oval Office, and
Mm.
it's perfect. It's absolutely perfect the way they did it.
Ooh.
Now, the rumor was on Dave because Jerry Weintraub was friends with George Bush Sr. Um, Jerry had an in there, and they said, "Oh, we got to go to the real office." They lied. We got to go to the real office and take pictures, and everybody accepted that. And then long after that production was finished and all this stuff was being archived, I saw the books. I saw the picture books they put together because they'll take still pictures and then they paste them together to give you panoramics and stuff, you know. And you could see the railing. They went to the Reagan Library. They did what I told them to do. And you could see the railing they have there when you go into the Oval Office because you can't go in all the way, you
Mm.
know. Um, so, but it was not, even the paintings and stuff. The paintings on the walls were exactly all the furniture was exact. The carpet was not the same carpet that Carter had, but it was. I mean, the way it was positioned on the floor, the desk was everything was just. Dave was just the most amazing set, just in every way. So, but Kurt Newman, okay, so later I took my script, I saved my Dave script. I still have it somewhere, probably in my garage. And you'll be introduced to my garage in the coming months. Um, I took the I took the Dave script and I redid the um the cover page on it because the way the scripts look, and I didn't know we were going to talk about this because I could show you, but it has the title in it, and then the author, and then down below it tells you which draft it is, like first draft or first shooting draft or whatever, and dates and Warner Brothers and all that stuff. So I don't remember what it was that triggered this impish side of me, but we had just done Hamlet. Icon had produced Hamlet, and we released it with Mel Gibson as Hamlet. And he so so with Steven Seagal, there was always a Writers Guild arbitration and absolutely everything he did because he would get a hold of the script and he would rewrite it. I guess he would rewrite dialogue that was more comfortable for him to repeat,
Yeah.
or action that was comfortable for him to repeat, or whatever. But he rewrote everything, and I'm sure there was a Writers Guild arbitration on absolutely every movie he ever did. Okay, but he had just rewritten something. I don't think we were. I don't think we were at the point that we were doing. No, we weren't. We were not doing the Stuart Baird film yet, Executive Decision, because he went in and rewrote that stuff too. Um, but I took the day script and I redid the thing, and I had Macbeth, story and screenplay by Steven Seagal. Okay. And then in parentheses, additional dialogue by W. Shakespeare. Okay. I didn't even give Shakespeare his whole name.
So brilliant.
And Kurt saw that and he's like, oh my God. I mean, for a split second, he's buying it. Oh my God. And then he got the joke. And I mean, he enjoyed it. I mean, he turned completely red and everything. He was trying to contain the laughter so much because I mean, it really was funny. Um, and then
The
he borrowed
question
it. He took my script and he was taking it around and showing it to people.
the question is, how would Seagal have reacted if someone said, "Hey, Steven, I love what you did here," and held it up for Steven to see? Like, well, how would he have like been confused by it, or would he have been like,
Yeah.
"I know,
Well, I think you need to contact him and say, Bill Daly gave me a copy of that Macbeth script you wrote.
yeah, yeah."
See,
I'll be
see
like,
what his reaction is.
it is fantastic. I should do that. Actually, we should do that live for everyone to witness. It could lead to an interesting conversation, but we'd expect no less with an interaction with Seagal. You never know what you
Well,
might get.
he's always been an interesting person. There's,
Yeah, yeah,
so we're not women. He's not going to pick on us. If the rumors are true,
yeah. If the rumors are true,
you
yeah.
know.
Uh,
So, you know.
all right, buddy. Well, listen, man. 2 hours of fun with Bill Daly moves very quick.
Hello, we're the Fab Four. He's Gavin.
And he's Hardy, and we're both two people from the Fab Four. Help us find a cure for NMOSD, and with it, cancer. Go to the Guthrie Jackson Foundation today and donate. Thank you very much.